I've been told 4 or 5 times lately that InSafe flies under the radar screen and that nobody knows what we do or how we do it. So I promise to be a little more transparent today. One reason that people think we fly under the radar screen is that there's very little understanding among laymen about what the business of the environment is all about. You read in the newspaper about controversies, global warming, mercury emissions, all sorts of things, and people think that's the environment. Some of you may be in real estate and you're accustomed to these little assessments we call phase 1 environmental assessments, and people think, well, that must be what the environmental business is. Some of you may be associated with petroleum companies and know that underground storage tank leaks are a big deal, and people think that's what it is. And in fact, all of those are true. We do about 1 million or 2 or 3 in each one of those categories every year in terms of our revenue. But in fact, none of those are our core business. And the core business is remarkable. It's unique, and it's difficult. I'll talk about this a little later, but as an entrepreneur, it's very, very difficult to have a business where people don't know they need you. I mean, if you're a banker, we need you. If you're a lawyer, we need you. If you're in employment, we need you. But it's not clear you need us until you do. And then when you do need us, you find us pretty quickly. InSafe specializes in something called hazardous substance remediation. And we do that on very, very complex scientific problems. It's a business that focuses on unique solutions to problems which are, at the very least, threatening to the environment and frequently threatening to human health. And I'll share some of those stories with you if you like. That concept didn't exist when we started the company, and I'll tell you a little bit about that too. But now we are, in fact, the largest such firm in Tennessee. We're one of the largest in the nation, and operate a headquarters in Memphis with offices in about 15 places total, I think. We were international, but the recession killed off Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan offices, and that's another whole story too. I might even talk about that. It started in 1979, but it actually started before that. In my view, one of the greatest books ever written in the English language is a book called The Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. And Miss Carson, Dr. Carson, is a very poor writer. And she's very redundant, and her grammar is terrible, and her prose is contorted. But Silent Spring came out in 1968, and it was a life changer for many people, including myself. We woke up and realized, and this is, I think, very important, our society was engaging in activities whose risk we did not understand. Interestingly, I don't know if you've read the book or go back, there's a chapter in it about Memphis. An entire chapter devoted to what Memphis was doing to destroy the environment. It's pretty rattling, actually. But that book had infected me generally. So by 1968, as a college student, I knew my life was going to be involved in environmental protection. Difficulty is, there were no jobs in environmental protection. There was what you all might call tree huggers, or the Bugs and Bunny types. There are other semi-derogatory terms that are used to describe us. But those were activist positions. There were beginning roles in the government in regulatory positions. But there wasn't much in between. Now, I may be an environmentalist, I may be a tree hugger, but I'm also a capitalist, I freely admit. So in 1979, we began planning for something that now we call InSafe, and I describe it this way. It is science for profit. It is basic research, but it's basic applied research. You come at us with an environmental problem. Generally speaking, our business is to charge you some money, perhaps a lot of money, and fix that problem. And we've been doing that now for 30 years. It was a field that did not exist. We finally launched the company in 1980. It's a field that actually did not exist at the time. It now exists. It's a $12 billion a year industry, a number that's those are the revenues of the top 250 or so firms in the business. So $12 billion a year in this hazardous substance remediation, environmental compliance, environmental safety. So it's a big deal pretty much now, but a few years ago it wasn't. I won't bore you with Working capital startup, that's easy. My wife's bonus check from FedEx started the company. I won't bore you with the technical problems. That's incredible. The field still changes every Tuesday, it seems like. We're doing things now that didn't exist 6 months ago. We are doing things now that no one even dreamed about in 1980. And let me share a thought about that with you that you may find interesting as you reflect on our government. One of the biggest motivators for our business was a law passed in 1982 by the U.S. Congress, which you all call Superfund. We call the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act. And it had some legal provisions in it that are stunning. But the technical provisions were unbelievable. This law passed by Congress said that if you damage the environment by releasing a hazardous substance, you must fix that problem. No one knew how to do that. So you had a case where a law with criminal penalties in it for certain actions, but you come to the experts and we would just sort of gaze into the stars. We didn't know how to do it. And so, in effect, it is a science that created itself, driven largely by government law, and then largely driven by the financial community and the investment community who saw these tremendous liabilities coming out of the law. You've heard a lot of them if you're in the banking business, but let me tell you one that's really true. One of my clients back in the 80s owned a investment firm. They loaned money to people and they took real estate as collateral. And this company loaned a business $250,000 and took as collateral a piece of property which was identified in the loan documents as Tar Lake. $21 million later, we had Tar Lake cleaned up. So you only need a few stories like that, and suddenly it isn't about government laws anymore. It's about the kinds of risks that these situations create and how you manage those risks. Well, we started in 1980. Our very first assignment was in Texas, a DDT plant. We got a phone call that said, we got DDT all over our neighborhood, please come clean it up. Had no idea how to do it. But we hired scientists, engineers, geologists, biologists, toxicologists. In large part, we and our competitors, other companies in the same business, began to build this science. So by 1989, it was a budding field. I think the industry might have been, I'm guessing now, but $500 million or $250 million in 1989. And that's the year that something else phenomenal happened. I will confess to you that from 1980 to 1989, InSafe was largely a cottage business. We had about 28 employees. They were all here in Memphis at that time, I believe. Right, Mike? They were all here in Memphis. And in 1989, the U.S. government woke up to the fact that it was the largest polluter in the country. That's still true today, by the way. The Department of Energy, Department of Defense, Department of Interior use vast quantities of chemicals, release them in ways that cause harm. So one unit of the government, the U.S. Navy, announced that they were going to have a national competition to select 5 consulting firms to manage their hazardous substance remediation problems for the next 10 years. And it was truly a national competition. A great many firms applied for these. We did. Why not? So we put together a package. We said, we've been doing this already for almost 10 years. Here's our experience. Here are the problems we've solved. And I will never forget it. The Navy made their decision, and we found out who had been selected by picking up the Wall Street Journal one day and finding that InSafe had been selected as one of the 5 firms and would be awarded a contract for $100 million. And we had 28 employees. What's worse is that the word InSafe at that time was our logo, not our name, and the Navy was issuing a contract in the name of a non-existent company. So from December of 1989 to about 1992, we had our second challenge. The first one literally just being starting a company out of scratch that people didn't know needed to exist. And the second one was actually building that company. So for the next 3 years, every day was a work day, 7 days a week, many 14-hour days. And we took a small, frankly, bright, successful consulting firm, but not very sophisticated in business, and built it into a company which could do that kind of business for the United States government. Ultimately, I'll share with you that the government liked our work so much that the contract eventually became $160 million. It lasted not 10 years, but 15 years. And InSafe, from here in Memphis, Tennessee, and forgive me if I'll brag a little bit, but we did all of the environmental work to close things like the Charleston Naval Shipyard in South Carolina, a multi-million-dollar mess, which is now quite safe. NSA Memphis, the old Naval Air Station Dallas. McGregor, Texas, a chemical called perchlorate. You don't know a thing about it. It's in fireworks and rockets. And if you drink it or eat it, it destroys your thyroid. We had a case in Texas where the entire drinking water supply for 3 million people was affected by this perchlorate. And I'm proud to say InSafe fixed that problem. So our second challenge was really to sort of build the company. 10 years after we had the idea, try and build the company. I promised Pearson some more stories that maybe you could take home with you. So let me share a couple or three with you that I think are great successes for us. In the 80s, as part of the environmental movement, it became very popular to recycle aluminum cans. Everybody's recycling aluminum cans. Feel good about yourself when you do that. Well, when you recycle aluminum can, a company has to melt that can to make aluminum again. That's not an easy thing to do, by the way. And one way you make it happen is you add certain ingredients to this pot, and you heat the pot up really hot. And then the ingredients react, and you scrape off the top, pour off the aluminum, and make more cans. Well, the stuff you scrape off the top is called salt cake fines. And nobody knew what to do with it. It is incredibly dangerous. It gives off cyanide gas, ammonia gas, and carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, ammonia being the biggest problem. And a company in this business, not knowing what else to do with these salt cake fines, had trucked them every day to a mine in western Kentucky, a limestone mine. Well, limestone mines, they have holes in them, they have karst features, sinkholes, and that sort of thing. And these salt cake vines were so dangerous that birds would fly over the sinkholes and die before they could get over them from the ammonia coming up through the sinkhole. The inside of the mine was lethal to anything, with ammonia primarily and also cyanide and hydrogen sulfide. And InSafe got the call, can you come fix this? And Mike, this was 10 years? I guess we worked on that 10 years, probably before it was over with. But I'm proud to say that you can live next door to that mine right now and not worry about your health. Interesting management lesson I learned then. In 88 or 89, the government wanted the water out of the bottom of that mine because these salt cake fines react with water to form gases. So to do that, you have to have a permit. And to get a permit to pump water out of the mine, you have to know what the water has in it, which meant that somebody had to go into the mine, a mile underground, put a boat on a lake that's there, and get samples of water and bring them back up to the surface. So I went to one of our most outdoorsy, strapping geologists, a guy who's still with us, been with me for 25 years now, Paul Stoddard, and I said to Paul, if you'll take on this assignment, if you'll lead a team to the bottom of this mine in a lethal atmosphere and get the data we need to design this remedy, the sky's the limit for safety. You can have whatever you want. If the client doesn't want to pay for it, we walk. You pick your own team, you pick your own equipment, you do the whole thing. He said, yes, sir, I'll be happy to do it, and I'm picking my team now, and you're on it. So, management lesson number 4. I've got a video of that. We took a video camera into the mine. It lasted about 23 minutes before the atmosphere in the mine just chewed it up. We've got some great video of that element. Well, that's the infamous Fort Hartford mine, considered by EPA to be one of the most dangerous Superfund sites in the United States. And it took 10 years. It took a lot of money, but it is now safe. Another example, from much more recently in our history, about 4 or 5 years ago, we learned from the World Bank that the city of Baku, Azerbaijan, which is in the Caucasus Mountains north of Iran, had a tremendous environmental problem. The city is growing like crazy. It's very, very prosperous. They have oil there. So the economy is booming. But the city is surrounded by an old German oil and gas field producing raw materials, and had leaked, and then the Russians operated it, and it was just a mess. The photographs are just awful. Pools of water lying around everywhere, black soil, nothing grows. It looks like the moonscape. But the country of Azerbaijan wanted to have it cleaned up so they could convert it to residential. And that doesn't happen very often in our business. If we're going to clean up a site, we'd much prefer to use it as a parking lot than to put kids on it. Right? But InSafe was retained by the World Bank to do that. And we took every known way to clean up oil and natural gas pollution, and we set up a pilot for every one of them on the site. And they're very interesting. You do things like you can thermally treat the soil and burn the petroleum off. You can wash it, a technique called soil washing, where you dig up the dirt and wash it through with warm water and try and clean it up. Believe it or not, you can use trees, phytoremediation, and using trees to remove hazardous substances from soil is very common in our business. So we built a forest on part of the site. Several other technologies, including one area we just put up a sign that said, "Don't go here." And so that took several years, and from a business challenge, it's very interesting. Not only are we in a foreign country, Azerbaijan is probably the most corrupt place on the planet. Everybody's on the take there. And in the U.S., we're all subject to a law called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act that makes it a felony in America to pay a bribe in another country, so we don't do that. And so finally, well, I won't bore you with all the details, but ultimately we got the job done because these people in Azerbaijan decided we were such idiots we couldn't figure out how to pay a bribe. They just give us the services we needed. Anyway, so there's something to playing the dumb Southerner role in some of these countries. But I bring it up as a business example because one day we woke up and realized they weren't paying their bills. And my CFO's sitting back there, and he comes to see me and goes, "How are we going to collect an invoice in Baku, Azerbaijan?" And do we ever figure out how to collect it? They just finally paid it. Yeah, our client, I don't know, some kind of bureaucracy, and only the president of the company could sign the invoice. And so after that, we got a little more sophisticated about doing work internationally as well. Well, off the war stories for a minute. The third big challenge I think a company like us has, and we're in the midst of solving that one now. Here's a startling statistic for you. 60% of all engineering and science firms in our business fail on the first transfer from ownership. 60%. We're a very interesting industry in general in that we recapitalize every generation. InSafe doesn't accept shareholders. We will not, only our employees are allowed to own the company. We don't accept any outside influence at all, but that means that eventually these employees have to retire, and when you do, they need to take their equity out of the business in order to afford their retirement, and so you have to recapitalize every generation. And InSafe is in the process now going through that. My two original co-founders have now retired, and we've survived that. It's not as big a deal for me because I don't intend to ever retire. But it is an interesting process in our business, this maturation in an undercapitalized business. To this day, InSafe's only working capital is cash flow. Well, we do have a line of credit. Let me remember that. We certainly have a line of credit. But that's largely the way our business is operated. And so it's a real business challenge, frankly, to keep recapitalizing and growing the company, whether it's by acquisitions or internal growth. Then I'd like to share with you as laymen some thoughts about, if I may, the environment and what you read in the papers, and maybe apply a twist to that you might not have heard before. I am frequently asked out in public whether what this national environmental debate means. And you know, it's been going on forever. I still graphically remember the enormous debates in this country over whether to ban lead in gasoline. And you should write a letter to any congressman of yours who voted for that. Because the IQ in this country was going down. The average IQ in the United States was going down. And we banned lead in gasoline in 1978. In 1984, you can see that curve turn back up again. We're now 8 points IQ average as a nation more than we were before that was taken down. But are you old enough to remember the debate? The world's going to come to an end. You can't take lead out of gasoline. Cars won't work. They'll fail. Well, they didn't. And it was a good thing for the country. Now, I'm a big believer in technology. I'm not a tree hugger in the sense that I think things have to be done to the detriment of people. I'm a strong believer in the fact that if you define a risk, you can define a technology and a science to apply to that risk. And so, that's a very good example. Well, now I see this debate going on now. Your opinion about the environment may very well be a function of your political party. And that's just wrong. It's science. Now, that science affects people, and they react when it affects them by becoming defensive. It's also true that the scientists can be wrong. We frequently are. But the science itself is a process of learning and relearning and continuous improvement. So when we're wrong, we try and figure out why and we fix it again. So it's not anything new. But I will tell you that as business people, that's a trap you do not want to fall into. Because environmental risk is real and the financial penalties are severe, even if you're not driven by the need to reduce risk, the risk that your company or your business causes the environment. And it can be measured, it can be quantified, and it can be fixed. And you don't want to wait until you're trying to sell your business or recapitalize your business to find out that these problems exist. And so the other part of InSafe that I'd like to sell you on is this idea of not waiting until these horrible problems are created, but get there first and try and get them solved. And we have a huge push in our own business now to try and make that happen, to sort of eliminate, on our clients' behalf, that issue. I give a lot of speeches to civic clubs and Boy Scouts and Sunday school classes, and the theme of many of those speeches I'd like to share with you today is that choices matter. You make choices as a human being every day, and those choices have a feedback loop on the quality of your life, the quality of the life of people around you, and the environment. And I'd like to give you an example. I use this with the high school kids a lot. But pretend like it's Mother's Day, and you forgot. So you're down to the wire, headed to your mother for lunch, and you need to take a flower. And you rush into the florist, the only florist open on that morning, Sunday morning, and they have 2 roses left. That's it. They both cost $5. One of them is perfect. You look at it and the petals are nice. There are no holes in it. The stem is straight. It's $5. The one next to it isn't so perfect. The petals have little tiny holes in them. The petals may curl a little bit on the edges, and there's probably some black spot on the stem. So which rose do you buy? Oh. You were in trouble with your mother, right? All of us buy the perfect rose, don't we? So the consequence of that decision is that 61 million pounds of the fungicide Manab applied to the earth every year. You know, those holes in the petals and the curls are caused by a fungus. And that fungus is evolved to live on roses. So it is natural that a rose should have holes in it. If you don't want the holes, that's fine, but understand the consequences of the decision you've made. And I think you could roll that into your business as well. And we find that the most successful managers we deal with in business, and InSafe does business with Fortune 10, but the most successful people we deal with are those who have understood this concept and apply the impact they have on the environment to their own thinking. And largely, it's a money saver. Here's a startling statistic for you. The most environmentally advanced, sophisticated company in the world is Walmart. There's a really great book called The Force of Nature. I recommend it to you. It is the story of Walmart's environmental posture. And I think Walmart could care less about the environment, frankly. But they love saving money. And they've learned that the good application of sound environmental risk management principles lowers their cost. It lowers their risk. That's why when you walk into a Walmart these days, there are skylights. That's why you buy detergent and concentrate instead of big heavy bottles that have nothing but water in them. That's why there are plants in their parking lots. All of these lower their cost and improve the environment. And I hope InSafe's been a part of that. Hope we continue to be part of that. And Pearson, thank you for having me today. I hope that was useful.